Okay, good morning.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Morning.
Good,
Good
good morning,
morning.
everybody.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. So we're up to Daf Yud Daled Amud Aleph. We're on page 14a, and we've been learning about the different laws about yodos, handles for food that could be considered susceptible to tumah. And if so, it would have laws regarding tumah, impurity. It would also have laws regarding being kosher for schach to use on your sukkah. And we finished this Gemara. Basically, the conclusion was that we can explain the brisa the way Reb Menashe wants to explain it. Basically, Reb Menashe wanted to explain the brisa in a way that every opinion in the brisa will fit according to the way Reb Menashe holds. Reb Menashe had his view that when you cut schach, when you cut grain, stalks of grain for schach, you do not have to consider any part of that stalk to be a handle. And instead, the entire stalk is kosher for schach, except for the kernel. Everything else is basically kosher. It's good for schach. So long as you have majority kosher schach, you're fine. Majority of it is kosher. So you have a long piece of straw, a tiny little kernel. So you're all set for schach. And that was Reb Menashe's view. And in order for him to have the brisa fit with his view, he needed to explain the brisa in a way that would take it into a different scenario than the case he spoke about, because the brisa's case has an argument about that. And if the brisa talks about the same case as he's talking about, that would mean that he only follows one view of the brisa. But if you change the story, if you change the scenario, the case, if you change the case, then Reb Menashe says, okay, now we can fit that brisa with my halacha, my law fits with everyone, even the other opinion in the brisa fits. How? Because he explained the brisa to be in a case where you're harvesting for food and then you change your mind and you're using it for schach. But the Gemara went through a whole series of problems with that. Can you change your mind? Does that actually change the status in the classification of a handle by just changing your mind, what your purpose is, what your intent is, your plan? Does that do it? Is that good enough to change your mind? You need to do an action. And so the Gemara went through a whole series of proofs. First, it proved that to change to something that's an actual vessel, you would need an action. It wouldn't work for your intent to decide, I'm changing my mind and I'm going to use this for schach. That wouldn't work. The Gemara says, but maybe for handles, it does work. Maybe just something that's just a handle of a food. Maybe for that, maybe it will work to change your mind. The Gemara brought a proof for that as well. But even there, it was not so clear. There, we couldn't prove it 100% because there's two ways of learning. Besasan, the word besasan could mean two things. And so ultimately, the way the Gemara concluded was that we can explain the case that is talking about that you threshed this grain. And in the case where you threshed the grain, in that scenario, it's possible that since it already had the classification of a handle, so even though you change your mind now and you want to use it for something else, or you threshed it, it still carries the classification of a handle. But the Gemara says, okay, that might work when it's in the threshing floor, that it still is called a handle because there's a benefit. You want to use your pitchfork for it. You can move your, that you have these long forks for farming purposes, and what they do is they take a lot of hay one shot. They can move it around, move it to some other place. So on the threshing floor, they use this pitchfork that will benefits you if you have a handle to your kernels. Because if you don't have a handle to the kernel, it'll fall through in between the cracks of the fork. And so you benefit greatly. You somewhat, I should say. It says you don't really care for the stalks, but if you're going to use a pitchfork, it ends up that you benefited from it. So in a case where you already gave the classification of a handle to the stalk, to part of the stalk, it has a classification of a handle. So when you then thresh it, you don't lose that classification because it still can benefit you. Because even though it's threshed already and it's loosened and it's broken, you broke the straw somewhat, but still there's a benefit to have pieces of straw attached to the kernels because you'll be able to move it around. The Gemara says, but what about in our case where you had in mind to eat it, and then you change your mind, you're using it for schach, and you threshed it, basasan. In that case, you're not using a pitchfork to move it around. So that the pitchfork is more for a threshing floor. So why? What benefit do you have? Why would it still be called a handle in that scenario? And in other words, there's an opinion there that it's considered a handle. Why would that be? So the Gemara answers that was how we concluded yesterday's Gemara, that it's chazia l'chisasar leminka lehu begilahu. It's beneficial to have a handle when you take down your sukkah, l'chisasar. When you take it down, when you take your sukkah down, then you will be able to hold the kernels with the straw. You'll be able to benefit by being able to hold the word is bigilahu with the kashin, with the straw. You'll hold it, and you'll be able to benefit from this handle. Is that initially going to give it a term handle? No. But once it already is classified as a handle because you were using it for food, and now you're using it for schach, but at the end you might take down your sukkah, and you're going to take down these things, and you're going to end up maybe holding it. You could benefit somewhat from it. It doesn't lose its classification of a handle, and that's the conclusion of the Gemara, and that's how Reb Menashe would explain the Brisa according to all opinions. Of course, there's an easier way to explain the Brisa, and that's the way the other opinion, first opinion, Reb Abba would explained it, that it's just a simple case of using it for schach. It's not you're not changing your mind. You're not threshing it. You're simply using it for schach. But the way Reb Menashe wants to learn it, which would somewhat benefit him because it'll make that all the opinions follow his view. So that's the way we went through all of those ways of figuring out, working it out how to fit everything in. Okay, now we're the new we're gonna be we have one small Gemara, then a new Mishnah. Okay, so we're on page 14a, and this Gemara we really did already. It sort of reviews the previous, a few points from the previous Gemara. The reason why it's doing this is because really this is the source. The previous Gemara brought a few points from this source. So we actually learned these points earlier, but this is the original source where it's stated. And the reason the Gemara brought it earlier was because it was bringing ideas from this statement. So this is where the statement is, and the Gemara uses the word gufa. Gufa, we just quoted this statement a little earlier, and we are holding maybe about let's see, 20 lines from the top. Let's see, 5, 10, 15, maybe 15 lines from the top of the page on 14a. Gufa we just brought earlier, and in this scenario, it's actually a Mishnah that we brought earlier. Often the word Gufa refers to a statement of the Amoraim, of the later author of the Gemara. But here, the word Gufa is used, even though it's referring to a Mishnah, but because there's no Gemara on that Mishnah, so the Gemara can use the word gufa here as well, even though it's a Mishnah. So the Gemara says gufa, it was just stated. Kol yodais ha'eichlin shebesasan begoyren tahayrais. All the handles of the food, if you thresh them or you did some type of thing that's called besasan, which again, we had two opinions what besasan means. It either means untie them or thresh them. So you besasan them in the threshing floor. They are tahor, they are purified from being susceptible to tumah and to cause the food item to become impure if something impure touches the handle. So the handles are no longer handles anymore if you did this act called besasan. Reb Yosi Metame, Reb Yosi says they are still potential susceptible to tumah. They are susceptible to passing over tumah to the food if you did this besasan. So there's an argument, the first opinion and the second opinion. And the Gemara says, my besasan, what does besasan mean? You did this act, besasan. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Rabbi Yochanan says, besasan mamish, you actually threshed the handles of which is the straw, with the feet of an animal. You went over this, they stepped on it and threshed it. And Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Rabbi Elazar says, Hiter Agdon, you untied the bundle. And that's what the word besasan means. And so we went through this a little earlier, from we had this Gemara yesterday, and we also talked about the word besasan, different translations of the word. I mentioned that there's a pasuk we know of, mispaiseses b'damayach. There's also a pasuk, b'shimcha navos kamenu, another pasuk about baises. Anyway, in any event, there's an argument what baises means, or besasan. And Rabbi Yochanan says it means threshing. Rabbi Elazar says it means you untied it. The Gemara says, Bishloima l'Rebbi Elazar, it's very understandable, it's good. According to Rabbi Elazar, Damer besasan hiter ogdan, that the word besasan means you untied their tying, the bundle. So in that case, Hainu dematami Rabbi Yosi, that would be a reason why Rabbi Yosi says that's not enough in order to declassify it as a handle, because you hardly did anything. It's called a maisa kolosh. That's the term used. You did a small action. Your action was very weak, a weak action.
Rabbi.
Kolosh. Yes.
Yeah, here it says, Rabbi Yochanan says, besasan. He translates it as trampled. One actually trampled them under the foot
of an animal, right?
Yeah, but he says
Rabbi Elazar is the other opinion, which I just mentioned.
Yeah, but you're saying something else other than trampled. You're saying
thresh means trample.
No, trampled means to step on.
Okay, and threshed is not where the animal steps on it. That's not threshed. Okay, I thought it was. So. Okay, yeah. Okay, fine. Sorry, I'll use the word trample. Okay, so we'll change it to trample. So the animal tramples on it. That is the Rabbi Yochanan's view is besasan mamish, and Rabbi Elazar Aimer hitiragdan. Rabbi Elazar argues and says that it means you untie the knot of these bundles. So it says Bishlam and Rabbi Elazar. It's good according to Rabbi Elazar. The Amar besasan hitiragdan. It fits well with Rabbi Elazar's view that all you did was untied it. That's called a maisa kolosh. This is called a weak act, where you you didn't really do anything to the actual item except that you untied this external tie that was tying this into a bundle. and all you did was untie that, and it's really a very minimal act, which we're going to consider. The Gemara earlier considered it similar to like a machshava, just a thought. You're showing what you're, that you're not planning on using these bundles anymore, and you don't need the handle anymore. That would be the sasan, means you untied it. So that would be a reason why maybe Reb Yossi could argue on it and say, well, it was already classified as a handle, and you didn't really do much to unclassify it as a handle. Instead, you just untied it. So because that's such a weak act, it's not going to remove it from being classified as a handle. Hainu dematami Reb Yossi. That would be a reason why Reb Yossi would say that it's still called a handle, because you didn't really do a major act of maybe trampling on it or some other act to really show that you don't want it as a handle. So that would make sense. We have the opinion of the Tanakama, the first view, and then we have the opinion of Reb Yossi. The Tanakama would hold that, yeah, you untied it. That's good enough to remove it from the classification of a handle. Reb Yossi would say, well, you untied it. It's not much of an act, and therefore it's not going to be any change. You're not really making a change. It's still going to stay a handle. Ella, but if you learn the other way, Ella the Rabbi Yochanan the Amar b'sasan mamish. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, that the meaning is that you trampled it. You had the animal trample on it, or use some type of instrument to trample on it. So according to him, so Amai Matame Rabbi Yossi. Why does Rabbi Yossi consider this Tame and still consider it a handle? Why is it? That doesn't literally mean Tame. It means it's susceptible to Tuma, or it passes Tuma to the food. So why does Rabbi Yossi hold that it's still considered a handle? After all, you did a major act that you should have removed it from the classification of being a handle, because you now trampled on it. Amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish, and this we also had before. Reb Shimon ben Lakish says that the answer is because you're able to that even though it's thrashed and you did a major act, but there is still a little benefit of having this attached straw to the kernel, because you're able it's much easier now to move them around from place to place, because you can use that pitchfork. It's called an eser. You can use that eser to move them around, only because it has the straw attached like a handle. If it didn't have that straw attached, it would not be considered usable for, it wouldn't be easy to move it around. And therefore, it's considered, according to Rabbi Yossi, consider your action of declassifying it as a handle isn't really a full-fledged action of declassifying it from that status, because it really is still considered a handle, because there is still some benefit of using it as a as a handle, and therefore Rabbi Yossi would still hold his view that it's able to pass tuma, pass impurity on to the food part, the kernel part. That's basically the end of that little piece, which is really that piece of Gemara was a Gemara that we really learned the day before. It was quoting it before, and then now we have the actual piece where it mentions
Rabbi?
it. Yes, Moshe.
Okay, I want to ask you, I know this is not off the topic, but what about corn stalks, corn kernels, and the leaves that are associated with that? Isn't there a part of and also barley?
Yeah. So the way it would work is that the any part that would be considered a handle, could be problematic. If you're taking it for food, that if you harvested it for grain, then maybe the halacha possibly follows Reb Menashe. I think it does follow Reb Menashe. So it would depend then what you harvested it for. Let me just take a look in the back over here. I have sometimes it brings some of the Shulchan Aruch laws. So the Let's see what it brings over here. So if you harvested these type of branches that have food at the end, so if your purpose was for eating purposes, then the handle is a handle. It's invalid for schach, and you would need to have majority more than the handle and the kernel or the fruit. One second, it's a little unclear here. Oh, they mentioned that it becomes problematic. That's what they're mentioning, because we don't know how much of it is a handle. As I mentioned to you, that there are many items that 3 hand breadths is considered the handle, but it's not so simple because we don't have any tradition on a lot of things. What is considered a handle? How much of it is a handle and what isn't? So it's better to be machmir, to be more stringent than not to use it, because we don't have any clarity on a lot of things. What they now, if you harvested these things for schach, so then there's no problem at all, and the entire branch is able to be used to nullify the food at the end. Now, if you harvested them for food and then afterwards you chose to use them for schach, so if you did some type of act that proves that like you trampled on them, so in that case, the halacha follows that if you did a major act, then it'll be removed, the status of handles, and you'll be able to use it for schach as long as you have majority more than the food. But if you didn't do a major act, you just like untied it, then you're going to have a problem, and it's going to be considered like a yad, and you're going to have a problem because a lot of things we don't know their measurement of how much of it would be considered a handle. So that's the way it's brought in the Shulchan Aruch. All right. Does that answer you, Moshe?
Yes.
About
thank you.
the corn? I mean, obviously, the simplest thing is cut off the fruit, and then you've got kosher schach. You know what I mean? And the whole problem is because you have the fruit attached, so you got a handle there to the fruit, right? But if you cut off the fruit, then you don't have much of a problem. But what it seems like is maybe they used to like having the fruit there to hold it down. Maybe that was their benefit. All right. Anyway, bottom line is we're up to this now. A little piece of Agada to Gemara. This is a little homiletic insight. The Gemara is going to take a little spin on the word eser. The word eser is which we said means a pitchfork. Now, the word eser is used in the Torah to mean davening. And where do we find that? It uses in the Torah, it says that Vaye'aser, Vayetar El Hashem, Vaye'aser Loi. It says Yitzchok daven to Hashem, Vayetar Yitzchok La Hashem. L'noichach ishtay opposite his wife, ki akarahi, because she was barren. Vaye'aser Loi Hashem, Hashem answered him, Vataha Rivka ishtay, and Rivka, his wife, became pregnant. So that is the word eser. And the Gemara is basically comparing that word eser to the word eser, ayin taf resh, which is spelled the same way, which we used in our Gemara to mean a pitchfork. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Elazar says, Lama nimshala tfilasan shel tzadikim ke'eser. Why is the prayers of the righteous similar to a pitchfork? The same word is used. When Yitzchok davened to merit children, it uses the word vayetar, same word eser, vayetar. He davened for children, and that same word is basically a pitchfork. So if you wanted to translate it very literally, you would say, "Vayetar Yitzchok laHashem," and Yitzchok pitchforked to Hashem, so to speak, if there was such a word. He davened to Hashem. Now, why is that? Why is the prayers of a tzaddik? Why do we use that word? So the Gemara says, the Rabbi Elazar says, "Loimar lecha," to tell you, ma eser zeh, just like this eser, this pitchfork is mahapech hasatvua. It flips over the grain mi begoyren by the threshing floor mi makayim lemakayim, from one place to another place. Aft filos and shel tzadikim, also the prayers of the righteous. Mahapeches daito shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it changes over the das of Hashem, mimidas achzarios, to a strict, from being strict, lamidas rachmanos, to being merciful, to a trait of mercy, from a trait of being, well, achzarios generally means more like cruel, I should say, from being cruel to being merciful. So what this means is that the tzaddik has the ability to turn over the mood, so to speak, or the way Hashem is presenting, is going to display his Hashem is going to display his feelings to the world. Instead of being the display of Hashem's anger, so to speak, it's gonna, instead it turns it over to display Hashem's, or to awaken maybe Hashem's mercifulness.
Rabbi, that's a very interesting choice of words. You would think they might have said, midat hadin, midat rachamim, but
yeah,
this is hard to understand, because technically Hashem is never really cruel. Hashem does things that we don't understand, but in our mind, we don't understand it. But it doesn't. It's hard to fathom this choice of words here.
The only thing I could answer to you is that maybe the reason it uses such a word achzarios is maybe because not having children could be, that would fall into that category, achzarios, almost like it's such a pain, it's so painful that it's like in a certain sense, it's almost like, maybe that's why the Gemara uses that. It's referring to Yitzchok's pain and Rivka's pain of not having children after being married for 20 years. So maybe that's why it's considered that, so especially because Yitzchok was supposed to be the patriarch of the Jewish people, and without having kids, it ruins the entire Jewish. The Jewish people have no future. So maybe it's along those lines together. Not having kids and being on the line. I don't know. I'm just giving a little thought why it uses that word achzarios.
I've heard the Vartaras where that the delay was because that Esav shouldn't be born while Abraham, he shouldn't reach his level of whatever things he did while Abraham is still alive. So,
it's definitely shocking to use the word achzarios by Hashem, right? It definitely, it's in fact, I'm going to just take a fast look here just to see if they have any commentaries that talk about it. The problem is it's more homiletic. It's not really halachic, this statement. So I don't know if we're going to find anything here, but let's see.
The milk thing is on every machine for milk.
Yeah, they don't have anything here, at least in the maybe they have a little thing in the back here sometimes on the homiletic Gemaras to take a look if they mention anything. Yeah.
Maybe it's just to show how powerful the prayers how powerful the prayers can be. You know, the choice is to show that this overturning by praying is such a powerful thing. Maybe that's why that word is
used. Yeah. See, they bring the Gemara, but they don't talk about specifically the Achzarias. And I see when they bring it, they seem to use a different word even. Like one of the commentaries, the Shalah, he brings Mahapchen Midas Hadin Larachamim. You know, just changes it to din instead of Achzarias. He has another, the Oiv Yisrael, Ma'eser Mahapech Asatvo, Tfilas Mahapech Midas Hadin Midas Rachamim. I wonder if there's another girsa. Maybe there's another girsa, another version of it that it doesn't use the word achzarios. Let me see on the side.
Weren't the Gevonim referred to as Axarius?
I see over here it does use the word ragzons in Yavamas. Chinhu be Yavamas. Uh-huh. Oh, and they do say there's a Aruch Laner.
Rabbi, I have something I can share.
Yeah, sure. The commentaries were surprised by the use of this unusually harsh expression. The typical phrase is attribute of justice. They noted, however, that in this case, the attribute of justice is not at work, as Avram and Rivka did nothing to warrant being childless. Rather, the attribute here is understood in the sense of afflictions imposed out of love. The use of the harsh expression serves to underscore that it is within the power of the righteous to overcome even that attribute through prayer. Okay, thank you. The Rishon Letzio Nezer HaKodesh. These are very late commentaries. You know, they're not commonly in the Gemara. You know, they're much later than the Gemara. But very nice. So that's that explains it, I guess, a little. That it's the fact that they didn't deserve this, and there was nothing that warranted it, and it was only Yisurim Shel Ahava, like it was Yisurim of love. So they're using, and even that the tzaddikim could switch over. Okay. I guess that touches. Yeah. Thank you, David. Thank you for having that. Okay, we're going to.
Rabbi, question.
Yes.
So why did they pick that one for Yitzchok? You know, there's a whole bunch of them that involve the term Vayatar. You know,
Vayatar?
Yeah, there's the one where Moshe goes out from Paro and he says
Vayatar el Hashem. You're right. Vayatar el Hashem.
Then there's the one with Noach prayed to Hashem to find out, you know, what do we do with our son? I mean, why pick that one as opposed to the others? Is it?
So the Gemara, you know, interestingly, Rashi brings this the actual pasuk, and he says Vayatar el Hashem Vayayaser, which seemingly he's referring to what we're talking about Yitzchok, but the Gemara, does the Gemara actually bring a pasuk? The Gemara doesn't really bring a pasuk. The Gemara doesn't really explain itself which pasuk it's referring to. Now Rashi says it's referring to this pasuk here, Vayeter Hashem Vayaser, which seemingly is the pasuk about Yitzchak, because both of those are in that same pasuk. You know what I mean? But the Gemara doesn't really say, so it could theoretically be referring to the other. Being referring to the pasuk that you're quoting, which is a good call over there. That it does say Vayetar el Hashem with I forget which Makkah. One of the one of the plagues, right? That's where it uses it by Moshe davening to Hashem to stop one of the plagues. So it says Vayetar al Hashem. Yeah, it's a good question. It could be Rashi, maybe that based on this whole interpretation, because the Gemara uses the word midas achzarius, or even midas ragzanus. So it could be that's why the Gemara, maybe that's why Rashi thinks that it's this pasuk Vayetar, or Rashi's just picking the first pasuk in the Chumash where you have Vayetar. Maybe that's why he picks it. It's just the first time it's mentioned. Could be.
Yeah, Rabbi, but you said before, in this case, they didn't deserve this. In the other cases,
that was my first answer.
Yeah,
that maybe that's why Rashi wants to say Vayetar refers to Yitzchok's case, because it fits with the word Achzarius.
Right,
because
right.
But that's a nice dray. That's it could just be that's just the first place. He's just giving an example. He picks the first case in Chumash where you have Vayetar.
Mm.
Okay, anyway, we're going to continue with the next Mishnah. The Mishnah talks about using beams or using boards, for schach. Mesachachin bin asarim. You can be mesachech with nisarim, type of board, which we'll soon see how thick it is. Divrei Reb Yehuda, these are the words of Reb Yehuda, that you're allowed to use these boards for schach. Reb Meir Oyser, Reb Meir says you cannot. And the Gemara says, and the Mishnah says, Nasan Allah Neser, if you put a board, Shehu Rachav Arba Tfachim, that it's 4 handbreadths thick, the width of it is 4 handbreadths, and you put this near the wall, so it says it's kshera, it is kosher. Well, v'vad shelo yishan tachtav, as long as you don't sleep under this. So what this means is that the sukkah is going to be kosher, but the area where this board is placed is not going to be kosher, and the reason would be because it's really considered a wall. You're under this board, which is not considered proper schach. And the thing is that it's by the wall of the sukkah, so it's not going to ruin your entire sukkah, because it's called doifen akuma. So the wall is considered bent, and it's considered that this is part of the wall part of the sukkah, not part of the schach part of the sukkah.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Just a short while ago, they were calling Rabbi Meir Acherim. So is there anything to be learned by the fact that it's jumping back and forth between Acherim and Rabbi Meir?
That's a good question. Why sometimes is Reb Meir called Reb Meir and sometimes he's called Acherim? I am gonna guess that it has to do with there's a certain story that from that time and onward he was called Acherim. So any of the statements of his from before that, he was still called Reb Meir, so we continue using the term Reb Meir. But after that story, any statement that he said was Acherim, we called it, we use the term Acherim. So that's why you find somewhere is that it's Reb Meir and sometimes it's Acherim.
But based on that, then Rabbi Meir, the Acherim reference should have been later. The Acherim, we just had an Acherim like a page ago, like on the previous page. So you're saying it should have been Rabbi Meir first, and then it changed to Acherim. Here we had a Chayim first and then changed to Rabbi Meir.
Yeah, if this was chronologically correct, the Gemara, for every statement in the Gemara was chronologically in order. But here we're quoting, when did he say this statement of this Mishnah? When was the statement where he held this Mishnah? We don't know when he said it. He learned the Mishnayos when he was, he might have said this when he was 10 years old. He might have had this opinion, or 15 years old, and the other opinion he had when he was 30. We don't know what, we don't know his, when whatever age he was when that story happened. Any statement that he came up with afterwards was called, but we don't know what age he was when he did this Mishnah. I mean, it's not based on the page numbers of our Gemara, how old he was,
Okay.
So the Gemara is going to go through and explain this Mishnah, of course, which is very vague. It doesn't tell us much about the this argument of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Meir, what type of boards are prohibited. So we're going to need the Gemara to explain what the case is, and where the argument is. And then we'll have to understand the next case of the Mishnah, which does deal with the law of Doif and Akuma, this bent wall. What exactly is going on there, and why does it pick these, specifically that case, and what is it really sharing with us, telling us, besides the simple law that when you do have this 4 handbreadth board and you want to sleep under it, you can't. That we seem to see over there, that you can't sleep under it. And as we've seen before, that it sometimes uses the term you can't sleep under it, but it also means you can't eat under it. And it uses the word sleep because eating, there's a lot of times you can eat under something that's invalid for schach. And that is because a lot of food items do not require a sukkah. So you would be allowed to eat a lot of food items under it. But when it says you can't sleep under it, because even a minimal sleep is prohibited outside the sukkah, and therefore it picks a case that is like a blanket rule that you can't sleep under. If it said food you can't eat, it would have to say you can't eat a meal under it, or a meal of a certain measurement of bread, which we'll see later in the Masechta how much that is. But so instead of having to go through details, it just says simply you can't sleep under it. Anyway, the Gemara is going to explain the different the cases here, the opinions of these Reb Meir and Huda. Amar Rav. The Gemara starts off with Rav. Rav has his view about this machlokes. Machlokes, the argument of the Mishnah between Reb Yehuda and Reb Meir. B'nasarim sheyesh behen arba. It's talking about boards that have 4 handbreadths. The Reb Meir isleg zeras tikra, because Reb Meir says that there's a gezerah, there's a decree that if we allow you to use boards for your schach, you will end up making a mistake, or someone's going to end up making a mistake, and think that the roof of their house is kosher for schach. After all, it's made by boards, and boards are wood. Wood grows from the ground. Wood is also something that if it's not a receptacle, like if it's flat, it is not susceptible to impurity, which makes it also a good reason why it should be valid for schach, because you need those 2 criteria. It has to grow from the ground, and it cannot be susceptible to impurity. In a piece of wood that's flat, and that's not a receptacle, is something that is not susceptible to impurity, and that would mean that it should be valid. So someone might think that their roof would be valid for schach because their roof is made out of boards that are 4 handbreadths wide, which means that the 4 handbreadths would be somewhere around 12 inches. And that would be like a 2 by 12. I don't even know if they sell such wide pieces. Maybe they do, huh? 2 by 12s, 2 by 8s. I know they 2 by 6s. I guess they do. I don't know. Well, in the time of the Gemara, that's what they used for roofs. They used 2 by 12. And the opinion of Rav is a 2x12 is very similar to a roof. So if you want to use a 4 tefach board, which is basically like would be probably like a 2x12, that would be a problem to use for schach. Why? It's flat and it grows from the ground. It's wood that's flat and it grows from the ground. That would mean that it should be kosher, but it's very similar to your roof because that's what people use for roofs. And therefore, it's going to be invalid rabbinically. It's a gezerah decree, a rabbinic decree. Now, why can't what's wrong with a roof according to this? What's the problem if you have a roof? Why can't you use a roof? A roof. You're telling me that I can't use a 2x12. Why? It's too similar to your roof. But if a 2x12 is kosher for schach biblically, so what's wrong with your roof? Maybe your roof should also be kosher for schach. So the answer is that the roof has a bigger problem. What's the problem of a roof? It's not made for shade, and it's made for it's made for as a roof. It's not made as a way of as a hut type of thing for shade, and possibly even to use to either in the olden days they might have used it even to as an attic on top of it as some type of a rooftop or for dwelling. It's made as a roof. It's made for dwelling or for storage. Whatever it is, it's not made for shade, and therefore it would not be kosher for a sukkah. And what would happen is if you would want to use it for a sukkah, so you would then you would be basically changing your mind and saying, instead of using it for dwelling purposes, I'm using this as a sukkah. What would be a problem then? In other words, I don't want my roof anymore for storage. I'm using it now. It's sukkahs. I'm using it for a sukkah. So now you've changed your mind, and you want to use it for a sukkah. What happens now? The answer is that it's the problem of tasev leimin ha'asud, that you can't kosher a sukkah by simply changing your mind and having it kosher, or doing some type of small act that makes it kosher, because it started out as invalid, and now you're trying to kosher it by just either thinking or doing something small that's going to kosher it. It doesn't work that way. It has to be made in a kosher way. Your sukkah has to be made in a kosher way. So anyway, the roof is not kosher for schach. Reb Meir says that there is a gezerah that you can't use these type of 2x12s because very similar to your roof. Reb Yehuda is less like zeras tigra. Reb Yehuda does not hold of this gezerah, and he therefore says if you want to go to Home Depot and buy 2x12s and put them along your sukkah, that would be kosher. Aval, but he says, but Rav says that, however, b'nesarim she'ein ben arba, if a board does not have 4 handbreadths, which would mean less than a 2x12, maybe like a 2x8, divrei hakol ksheira, everyone would agree you could use that for your sukkah, and the reason would be because 2x8 is not used for roofs. Now, nowadays, we actually do use probably 2x8s or 2x6s even for roofs. So the question would be if that would that create a problem now if you wanted to use those for schach. However, the simple understanding would be that the Gemara told us about this gzeira. In the time of the gzeira, according to Reb Meir, the gzeira was, or according to Rav, I should say, the decree, if there is a decree, it only applied to 2x12s or more or bigger. Anything less than 2x12 did not fall into this problem at all. It's not similar to a roof, and therefore it should be permissible for schach. Ushmuel Amar, but Shmuel says, V'she'ein bahen arba'a, we're learning that the argument is when it's less than 4 handbreadths, that's when there is machlekes, that's when there is an argument that we're afraid that if we let you use these less than 2 by 12s, then, which means 4 handbreadths, which is like less than 2 by 12s, that's when there's an argument where Meir is more machmir, strict, and Rabbi Yehuda is going to be more lenient. Aval, but yesh behen arba, if it does have 4 handbreadths, a 2 by 12, according to everyone, it would be invalid. If you have kol psula, everyone would say that it is invalid. So we've got an argument. Is the argument on a case that's less than 4, or is the argument in a case that is more than 4? That's the question that Rav and Shmuel debate about on the Mishnah. The Mishnah has an argument between the Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. The question is, what is the case? It's a case where it's more than 4 handbreadths, which would mean a 2 by 12 or more, or is it a case that's less than 4 handbreadths, which would mean less than a 2 by 12? That's where there would be an argument if it's kosher or not to use for schach. Now, the Gemara asks, Ein behen arba ba'afilu pachos mishleisha? According to the view that we mentioned, that they argue in a case where there's less than 4 handbreadths, less than a 2 by 12, that's where there's an argument. According to the opinion of Reb Meir, you're not allowed to use it even if it's less than 2 by 12. The question is, so how small? Even if it's less than 3 handbreadths, like a 2 by 8, 2 by 9, there was such a thing, would that also be invalid? Hakanim bi'almaninu. These are simply regular, these are reeds. And anything, less than 3 is like reeds. It should be kosher. What are you going to be able to use for schach if you can't use these? Why can't I use a 2 by 4, a 2 by 6, 2 by 8, less than 3 handbreadths? I mean, Amar Rav Papa. So Rav Papa says, no, you got it wrong. That's not what he meant. Hachi Kamar. This is what he means to say. Shmuel means to say, Yesh behen arba. If the boards are 2 by 12s or more, they have 4 handbreadths. Divrei hakoil, everyone would agree, psula, it is invalid. Everyone will agree that it's invalid. Pachos mishleisha, if it's less than 3 handbreadths, that means it's a 2 by 6 or even a 2 by 8. Divrei hakoil kshera, everyone would agree that that would be kosher for stuff. My taima, why would that be? Because kanim bi'almaninu, they are simply reeds. There's nothing, nothing wrong with using them. Kipligi, when do they argue? Bishloisha adar ba'a. When it's in between 3 and 4, that's when there is an argument. So it doesn't mean that anything less than 3 or anything less than 4 is an argument, and you can't use anything according to the opinion of Reb Meir. That's not what he means. He means between 3 and 4, that's where there seems to be a argument. But if it's less than 3, then there's no problem. So he says, "Ki pligi mishloisha adar ba." When is the argument? It's between 3 and 4. Mar savar kivan the lesnu shir makom. Since the width of this does not have the measurement of a place, according to Torah. According to Torah, a place has 4 handbreadths. That's considered a reshus, a domain. And this doesn't have, like Gazrinon, we're not going to make such a decree. That would be Rabbi Yehuda's view. Umar and Master says, Kivan the Nafki Lohumi Teiras Lavud, Reb Meir would say that, well, since it's no longer classified as Lavud, Lavud means it's attached to the thing next to it because it already left that rule of Lavud. Why? Because it's already 3 handbreadths. Anything of 3 or more handbreadths no longer falls into the rules of Lavud that you consider it attached. So since it's Nafki Lahumi Teiras Lavud, therefore, Reb Meir would say that it's not, you can't use it for schach. And basically it would be similar to a roof. In Gazrinon, we will make a decree to make it invalid. So that's the opinion of Reb Meir, and the opinion of Reb Yehuda was that we can be lenient between 3 handbreadths and 4 handbreadths. The only problem, according to this way of understanding it, is when it's, according to everyone, it's a problem if it's above 4, if it's 2 by 12. And according to Reb Meir, it's a problem if it's above 3, which means that it's a 2 by 10 would be a problem. Okay, the Gemara is going to try to bring a proof from the Mishnah. We're going to ask a question on one of them and basically prove the other one is right. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Nasan aleha neser shurachav arba tfachim. If you put a board on the sukkah, that's 4 handbreadths. So what does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says, Ksheira, it is kosher. And the Mishnah continues and says, as long as you don't sleep under it. So the Gemara says, Bishloima, it's good. Lishmuel, according to Shmuel, the Amar that he says, Bisha'ain bahen arba. We're talking about the case where there's an argument is when it's less than 4. That's when hamachlekes. That's when the machlekes is. And when it doesn't have 4 machlekes, aval, but yesh, yesh ben arba divrei kol psula. Everyone would hold if it has 4. Everyone would agree that it's invalid. Mishum hachi lo yishan tachtav. That's why you can't sleep under it. Ela l'Rav, but according to Rav, the Amar b'sheyesh behen arba, that he says that the argument is when it has 4. It's a machlekes. Avalein behen arba, if it has less than 4 handbreadths. So divrei kol ksher, everyone would agree that it's kosher. So this would mean that this board that's 4 handbreadths would be, according to one opinion, would be kosher. L'Reb Yehuda, amai lo yishan tachtav. According to Reb Yehuda, why should I not sleep under this board? It's not a problem at all, because Reb Yehuda holds you're allowed to use boards. He doesn't believe in this decree of Tikra that it's similar to a roof. So why would there be a problem? Why can't you sleep under it? So the Gemara answers, Mi savris divrei akoli. You think that part of the Mishnah is learned according to everyone. Seifa asan the Reb Meir, that statement in the end of the Mishnah, the way Rav is learning it, that statement would only be in the opinion of Reb Meir, and it would not fit with the opinion of Reb Yehuda. And it's just saying, according to Reb Meir, if you have such a scenario where you have a board that's near the wall and you want to use it, and it shouldn't be a problem, so you could consider it daifet akuma, and you don't sleep under it. According to the other opinion, Reb Yehuda, you could sleep under it because there's nothing wrong with a board that's over 4 handbreadths, because there's no gzeiras tikra, there's no decree about such a case. Even if it's 4 handbreadths, even if it's a 2 by 12, you can sleep under it. So the conclusion over here is that we've now explained the Mishnah a little better. In other words, what we need to do now is really go back over the Mishnah and now see how we're learning the Mishnah. Because now that we understand how big these boards are, then we can understand what the second half of the Mishnah is really saying. But we're going to stop here and do that tomorrow, Mr. Shil. Yes.
What about shavings, wood shavings, and bark, tree bark?
Yeah, seemingly it should be okay, except that it's got to be able to stay on top of your sukkah and not fall through. And for many reasons, one of them is if it falls through, it's not schach. Additionally, you don't want it falling through into your food. The interesting thing is, and I've seen this, the question is, are you allowed to just go to Home Depot and buy some 2x4s and put them on your sukkah? And would that be kosher for schach? Because, you know, we're talking about 2x12s, they're problematic, maybe. You know, what about 2x4s? You know, now would that be an issue of using for schach? So this is sort of where our Gemara is gonna come in, and we'll have to see in this Gemara if that should work. Okay, we're gonna stop here. Speak to you,
Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Sei gesund.
Bye.